mynews.studio.
Picture this: a courtroom in The Hague, rising sea levels, and now a decision that could change how polluters are held accountable for climate change.
It's July 26, 2025. The International Court of Justice just released what many are calling a major advisory opinion on climate change. So, can you break down what actually happened at The Hague this week?
On July 23rd, after 2 years of advocacy by Vanuatu and other Pacific Island nations, the ICJ stated that countries can be held legally accountable for their greenhouse gas emissions. The court recognized climate change as an urgent and existential threat and said a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a basic human right. That's a substantial shift. The judges concluded that failing to reduce emissions or actively causing them could count as an internationally wrongful act.
Does this mean, right now, countries can be sued for climate damages? Or is there more to it?
That's the headline takeaway. But it's more complicated. The opinion is advisory, so it's not legally binding. But it does open up new possibilities for countries harmed by climate change to seek accountability, maybe even compensation for loss and damage. For example, those Pacific nations on the front lines can now argue for reparations from major emitters.
But just to check, how strong is this legal basis? The court's advice isn't enforceable, is it?
That's right. It's not enforceable like a normal court ruling, but it's rooted in existing international law, things like human rights and the duty to prevent serious environmental harm. That gives it weight. Legal scholars think it could influence how courts around the world approach climate lawsuits.
Okay, so if a country or a group tries to actually bring a case against a large emitter, what kinds of obstacles would they face?
There are quite a few. First, since the opinion isn't binding, courts don't have to follow it, though many might consider its authority. Then, there's the issue of causation. Can you actually prove that a specific country's emissions led to particular harm? That's both a scientific and legal challenge. And jurisdiction is another hurdle. Which courts have the power to hear these cases? Finally, major polluters have significant legal and financial resources, so these cases could drag on and become costly.
Does this opinion change what's expected of countries in terms of climate action?
Yes, it does. The ICJ made it clear that climate duties aren't just political promises, they're legal responsibilities now. Countries with high emissions, especially wealthier ones, are expected to phase out fossil fuels, reduce emissions rapidly, and support vulnerable nations with climate finance. The court also clarified that these obligations aren't limited to Paris Agreement members. Broader international law applies.
Let's talk about the people behind this push. How did this process get started?
It began as a coalition effort. Pacific Island students, their governments, and global civil society all came together. They argued that their countries are facing an existential threat from rising seas and extreme weather. The ICJ's decision gives these nations hope that their statehood and maritime boundaries can be protected as the climate crisis intensifies.
And looking ahead, could this affect talks at COP30 in Brazil?
It's likely. The ruling could raise both the legal and moral pressure at COP30 and future climate negotiations. It gives smaller and vulnerable nations more leverage and could push for stronger international agreements on climate justice and finance.
On the topic of agreements, could this advisory opinion lead to new treaties or strengthen the ones we already have?
That's certainly a possibility. The opinion raises the baseline for climate action, so future treaties might come with clearer obligations and stricter enforcement. It could also mean reparations and climate finance are more directly included in international law.
How do you think major polluters will respond, legally or diplomatically?
Some will probably challenge the relevance of the ICJ's opinion, emphasizing that it's only advisory. They might argue for more flexible interpretations of their duties under the Paris Agreement and could lobby to limit their legal responsibility. We should expect a lot of public statements and diplomatic negotiations as well.
For listeners following along, what's the global significance of this decision?
This marks a turning point for international climate justice. It gives vulnerable nations a new way to hold major emitters accountable, could shift global climate policy and demonstrates that international law is now a tool for addressing the climate crisis.
So, in short, the world's top court has put climate polluters on notice. The legal landscape is evolving, and we'll be watching how countries, courts, and companies react.
Thank you for joining us today as we explored the ICJ's climate ruling, the stakes, the challenges, and what could come next in international law and climate justice.
And thank you for listening. This episode was brought to you by mynews.studio. You can try it now for free.